Thank you for joining us. I'm Nancy Sanders, your host for this edition of Guardians Ad Litem, We Speak for the Children. Joining us today as our guest are State Senator Nancy C. Dietert and Executive Director of the statewide Guardian Ad Litem office, Alan Abramowitz. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you coming.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Senator, if you could, I know we're here speaking today about the Guardian Ad Litem program, but I'd like for our viewers to get to know a little bit about you as well. So if you could tell our viewers about yourself, your family, your background, a few things that people may not know.
Well, I'd like to think that I had a background that got me ready for politics, but I basically don't. We moved here, I'm a native Chicagoan, and moved to Florida in 1978, and I have 3 sons. All went to Venice High, where we still live, and luckily they all found wives, houses, and jobs, and got to stay in Venice, Florida, and I have 9 grandkids. And frankly, in Venice, I worked in the mortgage industry. I started a mortgage company, which I had for 25 years. I served on the school board for 1 term only. And then I was out of politics for 7 years, and I ran for State House and followed Lisa Carrollton when she went to the Senate. And I served in the House for 8 years. I came and left with Jeb Bush. Then I was out of office for 2 years, and when Lisa Carrollton, who was our senator then, termed out in the Senate, I ran for her Senate seat, and I will be leaving that Senate seat now 8 years later, so it's been great.
Thank you. I know I read something about you're a descendant of Charles Carroll.
Yes, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. I was teasing with the director or the secretary of DCF, Mike Carroll. I said he must be a distant cousin of mine from someplace. But yes, we're very proud to be related to a signer of the Declaration of Independence.
It's a lot of fun to share with your children.
It is, and I
grandchildren.
took a couple of them to Philadelphia. They have, their statues and had their pictures taken. It was fun.
That's great. Director, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself too, your family, your background. I know you're an attorney and serving as the executive director for the Guardian Ad Litem program in Tallahassee. So we really appreciate you coming to Sarasota area for the, for this taping from Tallahassee. So if you'll tell us, please.
I come from a family whose entire work life is public service. My grandfather, my father, my brothers, myself, all served in the Army. And we learned early on that public service is the best you could do in life. And so I've pretty much dedicated my life to public service, be it as an assistant state attorney, assistant public defender, Peace Corps volunteer, worked a little for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees as a volunteer, and since 2000 have been the director of the Guardian Ad Litem program and reappointed by Governor Scott a couple years ago with the direction from him to just fight for kids. Great. And it's been an easy job because it's in my heart, and it's just a great job to be able to work with all the volunteers around the state to fight for kids.
Great, thank you. And I noticed in doing my research that about the time you went on the school board, that's when you were serving in the Peace Corps in Thailand. Is that correct? The early 90s?
Yes.
So, okay.
I speak Thai. We could do the rest of this conversation in Thai if you want to.
You'd have to be speaking, doing a monologue.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, Senator, when you served on the school board, I know it was probably the first time you really got involved with a lot of children's issues. Why do you think you were drawn to helping children?
Well, we were kind of, I think I had lived in Florida about 4 or 5 years. There were a lot of articles in the paper about the schools, that they had leaky roofs, the buildings were in disrepair, and I had 3 children in the public school system, and I had no idea that I was entering politics. I frankly just wanted to be on the school board to make sure that the Sarasota County school system was doing what I expected it to do. I thought we've got a $5 million post office, we've got all these expensive government buildings. Why would you fall down when it comes to education? So I ran for that spot and served, and I really loved it. I found it very fulfilling. But then we took a real nosedive in funding. In those days, they had a real bad process. They'd send you your budget, you'd make your allocations, meet with all the principals, divide up all the money, and a couple of months later, the state would send you a thing saying, oh, revenue estimating conference was wrong, so mail back $2 or $3 million. So when the opportunity arose to run for state rep, I thought it'd be much better to be in Tallahassee, more effective to be the person cutting up the pie than the person dealing with, you know, what they sent you. And it worked out that way.
Mm-hmm. You've been very successful. Okay, worked out well. Okay. Director, how and when did you become involved with the Guardian Ad Litem program? And tell us a little bit about the program. When did you first learn about the program? What have you learned since you became involved? And what sorts of things have you done with them?
Having come from a military family, I never lived in Florida until I went to law school at Florida State in 1986. And when you go there, they do not want you to work your first year. And so I saw a note on the door about the Guardian Ad Litem program. So in 1986, I took that sign, the number from that sign, and I called, and I became a volunteer child advocate, a Guardian Ad Litem in the early days. And my first two kids, Gerald and Candace, I still remember their names.
I have their names here.
And let me tell you, I know I made a difference in their lives. And since that time, whenever I've been able to, I've been a Guardian Ad Litem in different parts of the state where I've lived, and I know the impact it has on children. And even to this day, I still have a volunteer right now who texted me today that he graduated. So it's very exciting. I often feel I get more out of it than the kids that I advocate for, because it really makes you feel good at night when you go home and know that you made a difference in a child's life.
I know I've heard a lot of the Guardians say the same thing, and so I would echo that even from myself. I know I just became a Guardian this past summer, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it as well, and I think I get, you know, as much, if not more, out of it than the children I'm working with, although I hope I'm speaking for the children, you know, whenever I can. So, Senator, tell us about the young woman who came into your office one time. I know you shared this story at a recent luncheon that Guardians were attending. Tell us about the young lady that came in that didn't have a license.
Well, the foster kid that walked in, that girl, just by walking into my office, ended up changing my life, frankly, and then I got to change other people's lives. And that girl had no idea when she walked in. You know, every day in the Capitol's a different day. It's Cattleman Day, it's Realtor Day. This day was foster kid day. So they send them into the building to talk to legislators. This girl was from Charlotte County and I represent Sarasota, so she wasn't even from my county. And she had a real chip on her shoulder. She was a tough kid and obviously didn't go to any training school on how to lobby your legislators. She just walked in and said, I want to know why you people keep screwing up my life. And I said, I have no idea. Why don't you sit on my couch? And we spend millions of dollars to do that to you. Why don't you tell me how we can spend millions of dollars to improve your life? And I talked to her for about an hour, and I was, I think, chair of Children and Family at the time. So I have access to extra staff as a chairman in that category. So I called in my staffers and I said, I am not pawning this kid off on you, but she has some legitimate complaints. We have moved her from home to home in the middle of school years. She told me her only goal is to get out of foster care. So we're spending a lot of money to do pretty much nothing for this kid, other than keep her safe from harm. So they sat down with her and they spent 2 hours and wrote down all of her complaints. And then we went over it and I said, why has none of this been fixed? And they said, well, House members can only do 6 bills and they don't want to waste a bill spot on stuff that's pretty much statutorial changes that don't sound like big deals. So as a chair, I could do more bills than just 6, and I could do an omnibus bill. So we tried to bundle up everything we could, all of her complaints plus other things that we've identified, and put them into one bill. And one of the things I was trying to do at that time, and I think it was the year 2000 or 2001, I tried to extend foster care then, and we did not have the money for it, but we did have some money. So I thought up the title, Road to Independence, and in that omnibus bill, we were able to give kids a stipend if they would stay in school till age 21. So it was a way to keep them in care till they're 21, as long as they're doing some sort of job training. Because our kids, like most of the states, were leaving foster care at age 18, being put out on the street, not being able to drive a car, no family support, no money, and unsurprisingly, they were ending up homeless or in jail. So over the last decade or so, we have fixed almost, between Alan and I and others, we have fixed almost all of those problems.
And you also told that story of the young man who couldn't leave the county. And right, if you'd share that, I think people would find that interesting as well.
My aide made up all of the stuff that we did just for guardians. And at one point, and I love telling this story, Senator Galvano, your wonderful senator from Manatee, who does a wonderful job. One time I was doing one of these bills on the Senate floor, and Galvano was in front of me, and he started to laugh, and I said, "What's funny?" And he said, "What, do you have an agent that thinks up all these good bills?" I went, "Yes, I have Alan Abramowitz from the Guardian ad Litems. They think up all this stuff, and I do it." But the first one was the normalcy bill. Foster kids that would visit me would say, "None of us have ever been to the prom." So I said, what any ordinary person would say, "Is it because you can't afford the clothes?" And they said, "No, it's because to keep all the other high school kids safe, it's generally a lockdown thing. And we can't stay overnight with people who haven't had a background check and been fingerprinted, so we just don't go because we're too embarrassed to say. And foster care kids are like any other kid in high school, you just want to be a regular kid." So we did a normalcy bill which changed the dynamics and the relationship between the foster kid and the caseworker. That was the relationship. And we broke that and changed it to the foster kid and the foster mom. So she can decide if they can stay overnight at their prom. They weren't able to go attend the prom. They weren't able to travel with their football team. We had a kid who was vying for state champion, Godby High School in Tallahassee, Florida. Couldn't travel to Miami for the state championship game, and he was the kicker. And his foster mom got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and drove him over there, and he kicked the winning field goal. So we changed all those, and when we passed that normalcy bill, like the very next day, we had a call from Washington, and they said, "Would you come and testify before the Health and Human Relations Committee about the normalcy bill, because we've been tracking it." So we went and testified in Washington, the DCF director, Wilkins, at the time, and myself, and oddly enough, ended up testifying before Vern Buchanan's committee.
Okay.
And then we were notified that the federal government adopted our normalcy bill as federal law. So that law that came from Florida that helped the kids that we actually met is now the law of the land.
As a result of that one young girl.
Right.
So, Director, yeah, I'd like to ask, what sorts of things have you...
Well, if I can comment on that
yes,
first of all.
Yes, please do.
Senator Dietert's testimony was so compelling. That testimony has actually been the basis of probably 49 other states doing this law, because I send it to them as they call me. And it's amazing testimony. And, you know, she mentions the GAL, but in reality, anyone who really has a pure heart and has no agenda, they know if they get to Senator Dietert and it's the right thing, bills are going to happen. We see Florida Youth Shine, Florida's Children's First, the Department of Children and Families. She's the go-to person. In fact, I kind of feel like Forrest Gump, because, you know, Forrest Gump, he's in with President JFK and all this. I mean, in reality, we have a legend here. When it comes to child welfare, nothing has passed. Even when other legislators do it, they go to her to make sure there's no problem with it. And so I feel fortunate that I've had the opportunity to be part of that, because she listens to children. The most important thing is any child can get into her room and talk to her. She will listen to children more than any secretary, anyone else, any other legislator. She listens to these children. The GAL's role in this is that she can't talk to every child, but all the guardians are seeing things happen that they want to help these children. And it all gets passed on from the child to the volunteer to our staff. And I end up getting this. It becomes my burden to get to Senator Dieter, because I know if I get it to her and I explain that it's coming from kids, she will do something about it. And that's kind of been the process. And she knows when things need to be done and how to do it. And so we just don't bring her legislation. She crafts it. She has great staff that can really form it to make sure there's no unintended consequences. And in these bills through the years, a lot of them have saved lives. They've been set up in a way so children can't fall through the cracks. And one in particular that I'm thinking about is the Regis Little Act. This Regis Little Act, it was an 18-year-old that aged out of foster care, did not want to stay in foster care, but had a very low IQ, couldn't make decisions for himself. He walks out on Orange Blossom Trail in the Orlando area, and he's murdered within 2 months. Anyone could have seen it. Anyone could have seen it happening. He actually had a sister that could have taken care of him, but no one took the time to get the guardianship in place to make decisions for him, because he would have stayed. I talked to his sister years later, and she said he would have stayed if someone just said you have to stay. And so when that law passed, it created a process to save these kids. And there's so many of those, even ones that don't directly impact the guardian ad litem, they actually probably impact it greater. And one in particular that I want to talk about is the Kids Act. The Safe Kids Act that you did with Adam Putnam, Agriculture Commissioner Putnam. Kids get their identity stolen all the time. Regular kids, our kids. But there's one group of kids that get it stolen more than anybody, and that is kids in foster care. Because sometimes it will be a relative of theirs. It could be someone that worked in a group home. And the work you did on that saved people years, because sometimes it takes years to fix when your identity gets stolen.
Well,
So-
you don't even know it's stolen until you grow up and apply for credit and get turned down,
find out.
and then you figure it out. Well, trying to fix it at that point in life is really extra difficult.
Extremely difficult.
Another thing that she did is, she did the normalcy law, but that wasn't even good enough, because she wanted to know what obstacles have there been to normalcy, because the normalcy law was really about having these children be parented, and through that parenting you get normalcy. So Senator Dieter, was still curious about making sure it was implemented, and that are the laws we passing having good things happen. So the GAO went back and wanted to make sure, and we did a survey, and we found a big obstacle was foster kids driving. When they hit 15, only 2% in all the children that age out of foster care could drive. Okay, and now that sounds bad, but it's even worse if you're in foster care, because if my kid didn't have a license and he turned 18, he has me, and he has his mom, and he has family. So it became a bigger thing for the youth in foster care. And lo and behold, next year, the law, Keys to Independence Act, making it available for children, funding, so they can get all the things necessary so they could go through, get their learner's permit, get their driver's license, get their insurance paid for, and really helping to make them independent.
Well, this is where we don't think of these problems unless the kids talk to us about it. And when I explained this to voters, that we did the Keys to Independence, well, why couldn't they drive? I said, we forget, if you don't have any parents, you don't have anybody to put you on their insurance policy. And it really, it covers, very few kids, so it's not all that much money, but it's such a huge impact. So if you're leaving our care on your 18th birthday, not being able to drive, you're probably not going to be very successful. You're not going to be able to get to work and school. The testimony was so compelling. When we do these bills, there's a group called Youth Shine, and I love them to death. These are kids that have aged out of foster care, but they come and support bills and give their personal testimony.
So they speak as well.
They show up, and they're always well-dressed. They have a suit and tie. They look nice. Youth Shine practices with them so that it's a good confidence builder for them. And I keep saying, it looks nice on your resume, testified before a Senate committee. So one of the young men got up to testify on behalf of the driver's license bill, and he said, I'm a foster kid myself, and now I have a young man that I am fostering, lives at my house, and you'd be surprised how hard it is to go to the grocery store and come home with milk in August and take the bus and have everything get home. And if he could drive, that would be very helpful. And I think it was Senator Hayes on the committee. He loves these kids too, and he always asks good questions. And he said, well, you said you're fostering a kid. Is he related to you? And the 23-year-old said, well, sir, is he a blood relative? No. No, sir, he is not. But is he the only family I have? Yes, sir, he is. So
Wonderful answer.
who doesn't want to be their hero? Who doesn't want to help these kids?
And it sounds like the two of you have such a wonderful relationship. I'm wondering, I know you wanted to jump in and say whatever it was you wanted to say.
She takes that,
Okay.
Senator Dieter takes that issue that you just heard to the next level. She redefined the word sibling in statute to include people in foster care that are living together as brother and sister as siblings.
Okay.
Who does that?
Dieter.
Who sees what happens, hears from the kids, but executes it in a way where these kids can keep in touch with each other beyond? Because before, confidentiality, you leave the group home, you can never talk to that person you've been with for 3 years. And these kids love it because that is their brother and sister. And so when you see what happens from what she hears, how she forms it into law, and how these children are cared for, these kids, you talk about the legacy people have with individuals. There's so many kids that are going to have success, and they probably won't even know Senator Dieter, but they could not have had that success based on what happened these last 10, 15 years in legislation, year after year. There's no gaps. I went through each year. There were bills every year, and chipping away and making it better.
I have a list here, and there's no way we could read the list, not only of, the different bills that you've had enacted as, for children, and also the recognitions and awards and things that, where people want to say thank you. And I'm sure if you're anything like me, it's getting a thank you from a child that probably means as much.
Well, when you actually get to meet the kids and hear their story and know they have a problem that frankly should have been fixed decades ago, but I have the power to fix it. Lucky me. And all of this sounds easy because it's common sense, but there's always an opponent to every idea, no matter how good the idea is. It took me 4 years to pass no texting while driving, which should be, that should have been a 5-minute bill. Years ago, I read in Reader's Digest, the perfect bill took 20 years to pass. The perfect bill was that we're going to slope the sidewalk at the curb so that people in a wheelchair can cross the street. Perfect common sense.
20 years.
You know who fought that? The blind people.
Oh, okay.
They feel for the curb, so they know when to cross. So for every proponent, there's an opponent. So we would get our people together, we'd come up with these ideas, and then people come out of the woodwork to fight them. So,
I hope you mentioned the adoption bill, because the thing she's doing impacts babies too. But one thing I want to point out is since 2010, all these bills, and there's been like 8 of them, not one no vote in any subcommittee, committee, appropriation, floor, and the governor has been supportive 100% on this stuff. In fact, me and you were talking earlier, the last 6 years, we've probably passed more child welfare laws for kids that the governor signed than in the last 20 years.
right. I think so too.
Okay, I know we're getting close to the end now, which is unfortunate. Things always seem to fly so quickly. I'd like to ask you kind of a bucket list question, okay? What do you have in your bucket list that professionally and personally that you would still like to accomplish? And I'll start with you, Senator, and then we'll go with the director.
Well, frankly, finishing up this year has been so great. What we had left on my bucket list were 2 things. I did filmmaking in Florida for for years, and I wish I could have gotten that done. And there's still some work to be done on group homes, a lot of work to be done on group homes. So those would have been two things that I would have finished up if I had time.
And who will be picking up where you left off?
I have appointed a person.
Okay. Who will be working with the director? Okay.
Senator Bradley has, came up and volunteered, and I said, good, because I was going to pick a replacement, and you're my guy.
Okay.
Very smart, very well thought of, and a real hard worker from Jacksonville, and he'll do a good job on those issues.
And personally?
Who's going to replace me personally?
No, not replace you.
Oh, for personal
That's
stuff?
something you'd like to do personally.
Golf.
I have
Golf,
just,
more time to golf.
Yes, I'm thrilled to be home this year to live in my house.
Okay.
I've loved the work I've done, but it's a 5.5-hour drive to Tallahassee, and this year I'm just grateful to be home. I'm running for county commission. I'll have interesting work to do, same issues, only local, and I get to live in my town that I love.
Which is near your grandchildren and your children.
All of my
Yes.
kids and 9 grandchildren, if you drew a circle, we all live within 2 miles.
Wonderful.
It's wonderful.
Okay, director, bucket list, personal and professional.
First of all, with regard to bills, a year is a long time in the life of a child. These kids are staying in foster care too long. We're working on a bill, and I wish you were still here, because this one you would love, that empowers the parents when they get the case plan to be able to get the judge to know if they have an obstacle to doing it. And when they identify it, DCF, or the Community-Based Care Agency, has an obligation to resolve that conflict. And if you get to the judicial review and no one's brought up the issue, we need to move on to something else, because these children cannot, the state cannot raise children, okay? The state was never meant to be a parent. We really need to get kids through the system. And parents, everyone who's a legislator that's a parent knows that if someone took their kid, they would move heaven and earth to get their child back. We need to have an expectation these parents are fighting to get their kids back, and that if there's an obstacle, that DCF is meeting that obstacle. I anticipate if we do this bill right, kids will be reunified a lot sooner, and if it's going to be an adoption, it's going to happen a lot sooner too, because a year is a long time in the life of a child. So I would say continuing with Senator Dietert's legacy. I'll probably call you from time to time. Senator Bradley is one of the biggest supporters of Guardian Ad Litem program, by the way. He goes to every Guardian Ad Litem event, and he has like one of those areas that has like 39 counties or something. He goes to every one, okay, and he speaks very highly of the volunteers. So we've got a good person that you've handed the baton to, and we're just going to keep working. My goal is to keep making a difference in the lives of children, adults, any way we can.
Thank you. And as we close, would each of you just make a quick comment about why people should become guardians, why we should volunteer for this program?
Well, I'll be brief. Alan talked about public service and the meaning of public service and how good it makes you feel, but when you get to the end, you just want to know that you led a life that mattered. So no matter how much money you make, no matter how big your house is, did you lead a life that mattered? And anytime you work with these kids, you're going to get that feeling that you led a life that mattered, and because it does. So I hope more people will volunteer.
Thank you. Director?
You know, when someone gets in their life and they just don't know what they want to do, let me tell you, call the Guardian Ad Litem program and think about volunteering. My dad is in his 80s, and he had been a colonel in the Army for 30 years, and then took time off, taught, and then he was kind of retired, and you know, he didn't seem very energetic. I introduced him to the Guardian Ad Litem program. He got assigned a case. He's like a new man. He's going to live into his hundreds now. I think I've seen studies that volunteerism causes you to live longer. You have a reason to live, and the legacy you leave is amazing. So I would say if you want to feel good about yourself and make a difference in the lives of a child, being a Guardian Ad Litem, a volunteer child advocate is the way to go.
Thank you, and I would echo those sentiments. I agree completely. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you. You've been wonderful guests, and like to thank you. We'd like to thank you as our guests. We'd like to thank the community for watching the show. We would like to thank METV for providing the Guardian Ad Litem with a forum so that we can share this information with the community. Thank you so very much.
Thank
you, Nancy.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.